name is Cierra Clement, and I believe that universities across the country are turning our college campuses into a playground for overly sensitive minds. Now, the statement I just made might be bold, and that's why I put a trigger warning at the beginning of this speech. You might be wondering what a trigger warning is. They're the new hot topic on college campuses today. Students are demanding that they be alerted when something in a class seminar or in a class discussion might disrupt their emotional well-being. And however, I understand the intent of this, and I'm fully behind the purpose to protect our students' emotional well-being. I also believe that there's a risk involved in how we're going about doing it. I'm a college student myself, and I know how overly sensitive college campuses can be. I also know how rude and insensitive some material is that's presented in class, and there needs to be a balance between protecting students from being emotionally upset, but also allowing us to grow and critically think about the things that we might not agree with or might not understand right away. In this speech, I'll present to you why I believe that trigger warnings and the attitude that comes from them could lead to a dangerous future for the minds of our generation. I will also provide a solution I believe to be the best fitting for the issue at hand. By addressing some of the counter arguments that I have been proposed my solutions, I hope to convince you of not only the problems I see arising in our college campuses, but also inspire you to be a part of preventing it. If you knew that the course that our generation was going would be to evolve into a group of people that don't have the capability to make it in the real world, would you be moved to action? We are the generation that will come out of this state of hypersensitivity that these trigger warnings foster. I understand the intention of them, and I want you to understand the right intentions of them as well. However, I likewise want to ensure that they are not used to cripple us as students from being able to critically think when working in the real world. That's the first problem that arises with these trigger warnings, is that as students, there is certain material that we need to know, certain material that needs to be taught. Just last year, at the University of Virginia, law students were triggered when rape cases were brought up in their law class. And although I understand that how someone who might have been sexually assaulted in their life previous to coming to college would be triggered by having to go over that material, there's certain material that needs to be taught. Because if our generation of lawyers is educated not knowing how to defend a rape victim, that's only going to hurt a rape victim later on in years to come. There needs to be a standard for what can and can't be brought out of the classroom setting. And that leads us into the second point. The real world is out there waiting for us, and if we don't deal with the things that are emotionally traumatizing or even upsetting to us right now, we're going to end up hitting them later on. There's no filter in the real world. When we get a job or when we're on the internet even, people can say anything they want, and it might trigger us, it might upset us, it might unnerve us, but we need to learn how to deal with it, not just how to avoid it. Lastly, this creates our generation into a generation that doesn't know how to handle conflicting viewpoints. I don't want to be a part of a generation that expects everyone to coddle to my needs and expects everyone around me to just avoid certain issues because it might upset me. But I want to be a student, I want to be a person who knows how to engage with people who think differently than me, that don't necessarily agree with me right away, because there's strength in that and there's education in that. I propose that the solution to this is that when there are things in classrooms that trigger us, that set off an emotional response, there needs to be counselors waiting to help students with that. There needs to be someone that knows how to walk us through a process of how to deal with emotional reactions like PTSD or flashbacks. So that way, we're not just avoiding certain material, but we're learning how to deal with it so that we are better equipped for the real world. Our teachers need to be able to be equipped on how to handle certain situations as well. They need to know what's the correct way in handling a student who brings up an issue and not feel like they're being thrown a curveball when this happens in a classroom setting. And lastly, there needs to be standardized rules. There's a giant difference between a student coming into class who's been sexually assaulted and something emotionally traumatizes them versus a student who just gets offended when a certain political stance or is said in class. There's a difference between that, and there needs to be protection for the students who have forms of PTSD, who have flashbacks, versus a student who is just offended or doesn't like the way that a certain teacher is saying something. With counselors on call and ready to assist students, they'll be able to give a long-term solution to the problem. By only avoiding the issues, students aren't able to really process and handle the emotional trauma they're experiencing, inevitably the world will not be able to censor them forever, and by providing them a way to work through their past experiences in a safe environment, the college will be truly equipping them for the rest of their lives. You may err on the side of thinking that by not avoiding these triggers, we're further damaging the students, who could be emotionally disturbed by the content in class. However, by providing a means of escape from the potentially damaging material, we're ingraining in them a habit of avoiding emotionally traumatizing things. Psychologists would agree that that's not a healthy way of handling problems, that we need to learn how to face it and process it. And if our colleges are equipped to do that, then we can better have an education for the real world. I presented you with an opinion on a topic that's very real and very specifically relevant to us as college students. The problem will only grow as we continue to allow it. Students won't be forced to challenge viewpoints or handle the things that make them uncomfortable if they're given the opportunity to avoid them. Making it a habit to avoid the things you're afraid of is only further crippling and not preparing students for the world that's awaiting them. If the goal of the university is to equip students to thrive in the real world, then they need to be working on implementing procedures that work for long-term solutions. These solutions will need to involve people that are in positions of boards and of higher authority. However, us students are involved in the root of the problem. We need to dedicate ourselves to tackling these issues long-term. I challenge you to not take the viewpoint of the victim mentality. However, when things come up in class that are emotionally traumatizing or do challenge a way that you think, a way that something that you believe, instead of being upset and unnerved by it, take into consideration the truth behind it or what it's doing to you and learn how to process it correctly. Seek out counselors or help in certain situations, and don't just avoid these issues or ask for them to be avoided. At the beginning of my speech, I commented on the direction I see our generation going. Some of you may have considered that offensive, or it may have triggered in you a response. That was exactly the point. We need to be challenged, and that is going to make us uncomfortable at times, but we can take these opportunities to grow and become more grounded in what we believe. In the culture that we are coming into, it's becoming more and more a trend to make the person who is challenging you the enemy, but we need to dedicate ourselves to being open to viewpoints that are different than our own. Thank you for your time and allowing me to maybe challenge you.